Hello YouTube, welcome to Fine Day. Today we are going to have a look at the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty full set review for Historic Brawl, this time around with all the red cards, so let's jump straight into it. Also, if you're looking for the other parts, just look into the description. Aki Amber Keeper, 1 in a red, 2/1. Whenever a non-token modified creature you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. So modified is equipment, if a creature is equipped, has an aura on it, or has a counter on it. So the thing with this card is that it counts its own. So if you put a counter on this and it dies, you create a 1/1 spirit. But these effects usually are like reserved for sacrifice the decks, and like you can use this in Rakdos Sacrifice. The problem is that I don't see this getting like equipped or getting counters on it, but if you have some ways to do that, that is a potentially really powerful effect. Aki Ronin, 1 in a red, 1/3. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. I wouldn't even play this in Samurai/Warrior Tribal, so probably a no. Aki Warpaint, 1 red, enchant artifact or creature as long as the enchant permanent is a creature gets +2/+1. So this is definitely one of the bigger buffs we have for 1 red, especially for like a permanent buff. So things like Welder, Keeper of Flames really love this. So if you're like a commander that really likes to have very cheap auras attached onto them, this is just a redundant piece. I like it. Ambitious Assault, 2 in a red, creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. If you control a modified creature, draw a card. These effects usually, like, as weird as this sounds, even if the set draw a card immediately without the modified clause, I wouldn't play it, because I don't like, it doesn't matter if this draws a card or not. These kinds of effects are there to, you know, kill the opponent, and then you don't need cards anymore if the opponent is dead. And no, I don't think this is playable. Atsushi, the Blazing Sky, 2 and double red, 4/4, flying trample. When it dies, either exile the top 2 until end of turn, until the end of next turn. You may play those cards, or create 3 treasure tokens. So usually when this dies, like I imagine this being played in like aggressive red decks, maybe a bit more mid-rangey, but maybe use this as top end. Thing is, 99% of the time you are going to use the exile top 2 effect for this. And yeah, if it has haste, like not having haste instead of like trample is what is a deal breaker here to me. So probably not going to see play a whole lot, but it is a 4-mana dragon and we don't have too many of those, so in Dragon Tribal this is certainly decent. Bronze Plate Boar, 2 in a red, 3/2, artifact creature and boar trample. Equipped creature gets +3/+2 and has trample, and then equip 5. It is probably too expensive if you're searching. Like, this is another like artifact creature that is like somewhat okay statted if you're in aggressive strategy. Otherwise, probably won't see play. Crackling Emergence, 1 in a red, enchant land you control. It is a 3/3 red spirit creature token with well, not token, but a creature with haste. It's still a land. And then if the land would be destroyed, instead this goes to the graveyard and the land has indestructible until end of turn. So the thing here is, this is like at the very least kind of a 3-drop, because the haste on the land does not matter if it can't attack, and if you pay 2 mana into this on curve, then the land is tapped. So that, like, because this doesn't untap the land, I don't think it is too great. Yeah, next. Dragonspark Reactor, 1 in a red. When it enters or another artifact enters the battlefield, put a charge counter on it, and then sacrifice it. It deals damage equal to the number of charge counters to a player and up to 1 target creature equal to the number of charge counters. So the thing that holds this card back, like, is the 4 mana clause of like you need to pay so much mana for this to activate after it hit the field already. Like if the sacrifice was 1 or maybe 2 mana, I would have seen this being played, but at 4 mana I don't think this will do it. Experimental Synthesizer, 1 red, well, just a red. Artifact. When it enters or leaves the battlefield, exile the top card of your library. You may, until end of turn, you may play that card, and then for 3 you can sacrifice it and create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. Activate only as a sorcery. This card is really good, like really good. If you, for example, play a Burgi Storm deck, this is another red cantrip that you can basically play for free and then, you know, just storm off. So that is great for those critical mass Burgi turns. But also, if you are an artifact like Sacrifice deck, this is amazing because this is just the fodder you want. It's basically draw 2 on a 1 mana body and then get additional value out of sacrificing this. And if you want to, you can sacrifice it on its own. But I assume that if you're playing this, you're like you got your value out of it. Like you get your value out of this cards in other ways, either by not caring for the last part or, you know, sacrificing it with something else. But great card. Explosive Entry, 1 in red, destroy up to 1 target artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. Pretty filler. I don't think this will see play. Explosive Singularity, 8 and double red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, tap any number of untapped creatures you control and cost 1 less for each creature tapped this way, so basically Convoke. And then deals 10 damage to any target. For this to be like playable, I'd say 5, maybe 6 mana is what you want to pay, and you really need so many creatures on the board for that. Probably not going to see play unless if you're playing a deck that like cheats on mana costs in other ways as well, then this might see play because like this is just a big thing to cheat out. Yeah. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Tuna red. Saga, first chapter, create a 2/2 Goblin Shaman token with whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure. Chapter 2, you may discard up to 2 cards. If you do, draw that many cards. And then chapter 3 transforms into Reflection of Kiki Jiki, where it's a 2/2 creature that for 1 and tap, create a token of a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control except it gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Notably, this doesn't have haste, so you can't immediately like tap it when this transforms, because the transform, how it's worded, exiles it, then it enters the battlefield as the transform card, and you know it doesn't have haste, so you can't activate this line. But so the Goblin Shaman does not have haste, so I don't see this being used in aggro decks, and I don't think they're like. Even if you're a combo deck, like, can you afford your combo? Like, if there are combos with this card, can you afford your combo to be like this slow, right? Like, you're waiting 3 turns or like 2 turns for the activation here. So yeah, probably too slow. Flame Discharge, X and a red, instant, deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. If you do control a modified creature, that deals that much damage +2 instead. Doesn't go face, so that is a big problem, and I think that is what's ultimately holding this back, because like these burn spells mostly see play in red aggro decks to go face. Gift of Wrath, 3 in a red. Enchant, artifact, or creature. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, gets +2/+2 and has menace, and when it leaves, create a 2/2 red spirit token with menace. I think like we have a bunch of auras that don't see play and that are better than this, so I don't think this will see play. Go Shintai of Ancient Wars, 2 in a red, 2/2 first strike. At the beginning of end step, you may pay 1. If you do, it deals X damage to target player or planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines to control. Like with the new shrines, I see a bunch of them that are just there to finish off the opponent and don't do much else to like control the board. But like you need to have a catch-up mechanics on your shrine usually. to win because you're losing a lot of tempo in the early game, and then you're gaining your value from repeatedly like gaining life is probably a better effect than this. Like you are going to run out of life usually if you're against an aggressive deck with shrines, because you're just, you know, not having any board presence. Like if I'm playing this, probably mostly for the shrine line of text, but other than that, don't think it will happen. Goro, Disciple of Ryusei, 1 red, 2/2, legendary creature, Goblin Samurai, and for 1 red, creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. 3 double red, create a 5/5 Dragon Spirit creature token with flying, activate only if you control an attacking modified creature. So this, I'm like, you just straight up play this in Goblin Tribal. Like it's a 2-mana 2/2 Goblin that can just give all your goblins haste, and haste on goblins can be extremely devastating. So it goes into goblins. The attacking modified, you could play this, for example, in Tajik, is where this could slot in pretty nicely, because not all the creatures in Tajik have haste, and some really like to have haste. Like you can have a curve of turn 2 Goro, turn 3 Tajik, turn 4 play like a Elite Spellbinder and give it haste, right? And then on turn 5 you attack with everything. The Goro has like a counter from the Tajik, and then you create a dragon as well. So that is pretty great. Yeah, you can obviously do combos as well with this, like Amiel Blink style combos, but usually you have Samut or Kenrith for those kinds of endeavors. But the notable part here is that this, as opposed to Kenrith, is a 2-mana card, but Kenrith is actually an outlet for your infinite mana as well, so I don't think this will take the spot in those kind of decks. Heiko Yamazaki, the General, 3 in a red, 3/3 trample. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you may cast target artifact card from your graveyard this turn. It's not a graveyard, not a artifact itself, and I don't see myself playing too many artifacts if I were to play Samurai Tribal, but we will have to see. But for now, probably not happening. Invoke Calamity, 1 in 4 red instant. You may cast up to 2 instant and or sorcery spells with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard and or hand without paying the mana cost. Those spells would be put into your graveyard, exile them instead. Exile Invoke Calamity. The really cool thing is, like, we don't have many of these kinds of cards, but this is an instant card that forces you to cast the card now, so it bypasses the usual timings of a card. What that means is you can basically cast as an instant in the opponent's turn, choose a sorcery, and you get to play the sorcery at instant speed. And some sorceries like are really not balanced around being like played at instant speed. Just imagine a Wrath at instant speed, and then just like if you're like in Jeskai control, like I know this, like just, you know, ignore the mana cost for 1 second, right? But if you're in Jeskai control, you flash back a Wrath of God and a counterspell, counter something on the stack, and wipe their board at the same time. Like they play Planeswalker onto a full board, counterspell Wrath of God, like that is just extremely backbreaking. But ultimately the downfall is you're not going to see this in like more than 2 color decks, and even in 2 color decks this is extremely hard to cast. Maybe you will see this in Kaikar Storm, because Kaikar produces a ton of red mana, and this gives you 3 cast triggers from Kaikar. So it effectively only costs 2 mana because you're casting the instants or sorceries with this as well. And so you get 3 spirits back in total. So I could see this being played maybe in Kaikar Storm. But other than that, the main problem is that the instant sorceries you want to flash back are in other colors. So you really want to be in 2 colors, but for 2 colors the cost is pretty restrictive. Maybe, but I think this is definitely one of the better ones of the like hard to cast instant / sorcery cycle. I like it. Ironhoof Boar, 5 in a red, 5/4 artifact creature boar, trample haste, and then channel 1 in a red, discard Ironhoof Boar, target creature gets +3/+1 and gains trample after end of turn. Combat tricks, kind of, you know, whatever. If you ever care about having a artifact that can pitch itself from the hand to the graveyard, sure, go for it. Otherwise, probably not going to see play. Kami of Industry, 4 in a red, 3/6. When it enters the battlefield, return target artifact card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Notably, this doesn't have to be a creature. So if you are a sacrifice artifact kind of deck, what you can bring back with this is something like an Ica Wellspring. Ica Wellspring enters draw cards and then dies again, draws a card. But then this would just be a 5 mana 3/6 draw 2, and I'm not even sure if this is worth it, because this itself is not an artifact. If this itself was an artifact, I would consider it probably in more decks because of the like synergy this allows. But like, you need a critical mass of artifacts in like an artifact deck, and this itself not being an artifact really hurts this card. Kami's Flare, 1 in a red, instant, deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and then if we control a modified creature, it also deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. It doesn't go face immediately on its own, and if it does go face, it requires a creature or planeswalker, so probably not going to see play. Kindle Fury, 1 red, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike on the end of turn. We have a bunch of these effects already, and I'm pretty sure not all of them see play in the same deck. Like, even if you have a deck that cares about them, the deck basically is oversaturated on these effects anyways. Something like Feather, right? So don't think this will see play. I messed up my order here. Kumono, Faceless Kakazan. Yeah. 1 red, well, just a red, and then a first chapter deals 1 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control. Chapter 2, the next creature you cast this turn enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And chapter 3, it transforms into Etching of Kumono, a 2/2 creature with haste, and whenever a creature dealt damage this turn by a source you controlled would die, exile it instead. The wording is kind of weird, right? But basically when something dies and you dealt damage to it, it gets exiled instead. So that is pretty like nice, like against graveyard centric decks, but ultimately probably won't matter. This card, however, in general is just absolutely fantastic for red aggro and is extremely potent and carries Zeph. So with Carry Zeph, you're always having a decent like 2-drop, or like a pretty good 2-drop to be honest, to use the second chapter on. So your curve is turn 1, burn them for 1. So it's basically like you play a 1 mana 1/1 haster, right? Like, let's compare the damage that's ramping up to a 1 mana 1/1 haster. Turn 1, both deal 1 damage. Turn 2, the haster swings in, so it's like a total of 2 damage, but you now put a counter on Carry Zeph. Turn 3, you swing with the Carry Zeph with 1 additional, so it made up for the damage that it missed, but then it also swings in with a 2/2. So by turn 3, this already dealt 1 more damage than the 1 mana 1/1 haster, and has just like grown the Carry Zeph. It has the potential to now do 2 extra damage each turn compared to the 1/1 haster, and is just absolutely fantastic overall. I really like how this card is playing out in that specific aggro deck. And if you are like a low to the ground deck, for example, like if you're a Helana and Elena deck, for example, that is pretty low to the ground and cares about +1/+1 counters, that is also pretty nice. Like, just, you have a bunch of really cool options with this card. But again, Carry Zeph is the MVP. Like, this with Carry Zeph as a commander is absolutely disgusting. Yeah, amazing card. Lizard Blades, 1 red, 1/1 artifact creature equipment, Lizard's Double Strike. Equipped creature has Double Strike and reconfigure for only 2 mana. So that is pretty cheap, considering the creature gets Double Strike, which, like, there are usually pretty conservative of printing. Again, if you look at this card, you play this on 1 and this on 2, and now you have a 2/2 double strike. Pretty neat, right? Ultimately, though, we have Fencing Ace, for example. Those kinds of effects really don't see play, and I don't think that this being able to equip to something will change too much. Might be wrong, though, because this creature is... It has a lot of things at once going for it. It's an artifact creature for artifact creature relevant. Like, it's good in decks where that's relevant, right? And you can use it on its own or equip it to something if that is also relevant. So pretty nice. So if it will see play, probably not because something here is individually powerful, but because it just is a nice synergistic piece. But I currently don't see it. March of Reckless Joy, X and red. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of red cards from your hand. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. Exile the top X card of your library. You may play up to 2 of those cards until the end of next turn. Yo, I love this card. Just straight up, I love this card. This is not an insane broken Ooga Booga card, but I love this card. I think it's really great. Just in general, I love what they did to this cycle of cards with the additional cost to cast a spell, exile any number of color, and then or pay 2. Like, the individual effects of the cards are a bit hit or miss, right? Arguably. But I just really like the cycle, and this card really gives you, like, shows you the potential that this can bring to the table. Okay, let's think through a few through a couple of options. The exile effect is notably until the end of your next turn. So what you can do with this is you hold up counter magic, or you hold up this, and then when you don't counter something, you pay like 3, look at the top 3, choose 2, you can play 2 of those, one of them is a land, right? The other one might be just like a cantrip, and then play the land, play the cantrip, you're happy, right? Like, you're forced to play them the next turn when you untap, but that's fine. Now, next scenario where this might be useful. Let's say I have a lightning bolt, right? I have a lightning bolt in hand, again in a control mirror. The lightning bolt is usually like maybe flooding my hand. We just had a great counterspell ward, and now the opponent is trying to sneak in a Planeswalker with the remaining mana. I have 3 mana but nothing in hand, but the lightning bolt and the March of Reckless Joy. I basically pitch my lightning bolt that I wasn't using anyways, only pay 1 of this. Now I get the chance of looking at the top 2 and maybe hitting a counterspell for the Planeswalker on the stack as well. Burgy Storm, or just in general Storm decks, might really like this, because Burgy Storm is kind of a hit or miss deck that can kind of brick on the starting hand. It is the potentially fastest combo deck in Historic Brawl by far, with upwards of turn 2 infinites, or like Storm Count 100, and just play Grapeshot 10,000 times from the graveyard. Right? Like, Burgy Storm has the potential of being extremely broken with the right hands. But the deck tends to brick, especially since we went to 100 cards. So that is why you don't see that deck too often. This card is amazing in that deck, because you're always probably going to pitch something. Like, the moment you start bricking in Burgy Storm is when you have red cards that don't cantrip anymore and go minus in mana, right? And this just straight up prevents that, because if you just have 1 card that you don't like in your hand, you pitch that card to March of Reckless Joy. March of Reckless Joy is basically free because Burgy returns you the mana immediately. And then you look at the top 2, and it is just really amazing. It is like a 1 mana Tormenting Voice for that deck, basically. So that is just really amazing, and I absolutely love this card. Ogrehead Helm, 1 red, 2/2. Artifact creature, equipment ogre, equipped creature gets +2/+2. Whenever Ogre Helm or equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. If you do, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. Reconfigure 3. So first and foremost, for clarification, because I'm 99% sure is like how this is working. When this is not equipped, you attack something, and then you sacrifice the Ogrehead Helm, and then you may discard and draw 3. When this is equipped to something and the creature deals the damage, you still have to sacrifice the Ogrehead Helm, not the creature the helm is attached to. So you always have to sacrifice the helm instead of like maybe the creature if this is equipped to a creature. That being said, for equipment decks, this is amazing. For equipment decks, all these creatures that reconfigure are basically amazing. Like if they're a playable body, right? Like with the lizard blades as well previously, right? I forgot to mention that. Lizard blades, Ogre Helm, what I'm going to say is like basically for those 2 cards and like all the other reconfigured cards as well. Reconfigure is just amazing in equipment decks because they provide you the creatures and the things to equip something, because equipment decks struggle with, you have very few creatures that you want to protect and then just slap a million equipments onto them, but then you run out of creatures and you're sad. So here you have mediocre bodies that also act as decent equipments, so you up your creature count that way, and now you're less prone to bricking because you just like only have 1 or 2 creatures, both got removed, and now you're sad, right? So those are like, it's amazing for those. Outside of equipment decks, Ogrehead Helm probably won't see too much play, even though like the combat damage line is pretty strong. Before you're running out of cards to like make full use out of this, the opponent probably has a creature on the board or like removal for this, and then it dies before the effect goes off. So I don't think this will be too relevant outside of that. But equipment decks really love this set. Peerless Samurai, 2 red, 2/3 creature, human samurai, menace. Whenever a samurai creature you control attacks alone, the next spell you cast this turn costs 1 less to cast. Only a cost reduction of 1. Don't think this will be extremely relevant. Next card. Rabbit Battery, 1 mana, 1/1 haste, so already playable. Artifact creature, equipment rabbit. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has haste, and a reconfigure for only 1 red mana. It is extremely cheap to equip. I think those will see play for sure, absolutely. Because the big downside of the 1 mana 1/1s in red aggro decks, for example Karizev, has traditionally been, okay, now I have a bunch of 1 mana 1/1s, now the opponent plays a 2/4, and now I'm extremely sad. What am I going to do? This basically works around this perfectly by allowing you to go tall and over those kinds of cards instead of wide, and that is just really amazing. And it gives haste as well, so if you have like a threat that you wanna doesn't have haste, sure, you can give it haste as well, and you're not really losing out on damage because the creature gets the stats from the rabbit as well. So yeah, obviously an amazing card in red-based aggro decks. Reinforced Ronin, 1 red, 2/2 haste. Beginning of your next end step, return Reinforced Ronin to its owner's hand. And then channel 1 red, discard Reinforced Ronin, draw a card. We already have Wayward Sword Beast, something like that, that has a similar like stat line with 1 mana, 2/2 haste, and then a clause that returns it to the hand. And that really doesn't see play. And I don't think Reinforced Ronin will see play either in red-based aggro decks. I just don't think the line of text is too great. But maybe this will see play over the other one just because it can discard itself to draw a card. But we will have to see. Scrap Welder. Tuna red, 3/3, creature, Goblin Artificer. Tap, sacrifice an artifact with mana value X, return target artifact card with mana value less than X from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste until end of turn. So this is a non-artifact creature, notably, that wants to be played in a high artifact density deck. The problem with this card compared to the other welders, like welders in Magic are like usually red creatures sacrificing an artifact and then returning an artifact. The condition on this guy is a bit too strict. First and foremost, welders usually are like 1 to 2 mana. This is a 3 mana welder. They don't care that it has additional stats. My welders should tap, and the stats don't really matter most of the time, right? Big problem is that it is mana value less and not mana value less or equal. So that is a big no. You can't keep looping the same 2 cards back and forth, which is like a big value thing. But you can't just do that with this guy. You'll always get something worse. So you need to have artifacts that give you additional value from leaving the battlefield, usually, or like being such a great artifact at low mana cost that you absolutely want it back. It's kind of tricky. Not the biggest fan. This is not an artifact, so I'm probably not going to play it. If this was an artifact, this would be a no-brainer because it would be way easier to include. Or if this was equal or less instead of just less, then I would maybe consider it as well. Scrapyard Steelbreaker, 3 in a red, 3/4 artifact creature, human warrior, 1, sacrifice another artifact. Scrapyard Steelbreaker gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Stat line is god-awful. If we want another artifact sacrifice outlet, this might see play. The only redeeming factor of this is that this is an artifact sacrifice outlet, that it is an artifact itself. Other than that, nope. Seismic Wave, Tuna red, deals 2 damage, instant, deals 2 damage to any target and 1 damage to each non-artifact creature target opponent controls. Notably, if you target a non-artifact with this doesn't deal 1 damage to each other. It also deals the 1 damage to the creature you pointed at, if, you know, it is a non-artifact creature. Ultimately, I think this is a bit too expensive. Swapped it around again. The Shattered States Era. 4 and a red. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it. Gains haste until end of turn. Then Chapter 2. Creatures you control gain +1/+0 until end of turn. Chapter 3. Transforms into Nameless Conqueror. Trample haste 3/3. Overall, way too expensive. I'm like, there are decks that don't play any creatures whatsoever, so this can just be extremely dead, right? Don't like it. Simeon Sling, a 1 red for a 1/1 artifact creature equipment monkey. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Equips if this or the equipped creature becomes blocked, it deals 1 damage to defending player. Reconfigure 2. This is basically just a worse rabbit. But a worse rabbit is still decent. Maybe we want to play this. The equip cost being 2 doesn't bother me too much. The main factor about this is that this doesn't have haste, so this itself as a creature is not that great in aggro decks. So, I mean, this obviously sees play in artifact aggro decks, but not much elsewhere probably, just because this doesn't have haste or like a 2/1 stat line for red-based aggro decks. So Cansons Smelter, 1 in red, 2/2, creature goblin artificer. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact. If you do, create a 3/1 red concert artifact creature token with haste. So notably, the token stays on the field, doesn't have to attack, and is an artifact itself. So you get artifact enter the battlefield triggers. And the main problem here is that this creature itself is not an artifact. Like, you really don't want to have a deck where, like, a wrong half deck where you just have one half of the deck and another half of the deck, and they only synergize between each other but not with themselves, basically. So that is the main downfall of this. If you want to have artifact sacrifice outlets, sure, but otherwise no. Tempered and Solitude, 1 red. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. If you ever play a red Voltron style deck, where you only have 1 creature ever attacking, this might be the card for you, because this is a pretty consistent source of card advantage. But otherwise, I am not too sold, because you're usually attacking with, 2-3 creatures in those decks. Like Gruul aggro really likes to attack with like 1 or 2 big things. Mono red just likes to go wide. So just attacking with exactly 1 creature might be harder than you think. Overall, a maybe. Thundering Raiju, 2 and double red, 3/3 haste. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creature you control other than Thundering Raiju. Holy moly! This is a new contender in red aggressive decks as the new top end, because yeah, I really like it. The main problem is that this doesn't have flying, whereas the dragons you usually play at 5 mana do have flying. This thing has the additional upside of pinging the opponent constantly, or just growing and growing and growing and growing every single turn. So if the opponent doesn't have a big creature, you put the counters on something else, and now you deal 1 damage, 2 damage, 3 damage. At the very least, like if you play the heavier counter on something, like equipment and aura, this can deal more damage quickly. But like just stat-wise, this is a 4 mana 4/4 haste. And I really like it. But yeah, if this does not end up seeing any play, it's because it doesn't have flying. But I am certain some decks really want to play this. And like this is if just in a vacuum you play this 4 mana 4/4 haste. Now next turn attacks 5/5, 6/6, 7/7, and so on, and that can just kill somebody. So I like this card. Tawashi Songshaper, 1 in a red, 2/2. Whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Tawashi Songshaper gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. This is an artifact creature. This is exactly what you want in an aggressive artifact deck for Historic Brawl, maybe the boss, right? Because itself is an artifact creature, and it also triggers off of other artifacts entering, right? This synergizes with itself, and that is exactly what I want from these kinds of cards. Like sure, this is easily basically a 4/2 attacking every single turn, because it's pretty easy to just make 2 artifacts enter the battlefield each turn with like Boros artifact aggro. So yeah, I like it. Twin Shot Sniper, 3 in a red, 2/3 artifact creature, Goblin Archer. Reach, enters the battlefield, deals 2 damage to any target. Channel, 1 in red, discarded. It deals 2 damage to any target. If this was 3 damage, this would be an absolute no-brainer, right? Like absolute no-brainer. The channel part is the really interesting here, right? Because channel is really hard to counter for a lot of decks, because they need to counter a activated or triggered or activated ability. I'm not sure. It's activated ability that you need to counter. And the cool thing about this is, if you're in a like artifact aggressive deck, you might just have get some value just by having an artifact in the graveyard, and then you can like sacrifice a 1-drop artifact, get a 4-drop artifact back, and do some cute stuff there. But other than that, I think it's just a little bit too little damage on the channel effect. Unstoppable Ogre, 2 in a red, 4/1 artifact creature, Ogre Warrior, enters the battlefield. Target creature can't block this turn. Stat line is pretty bad, so I don't think this will see any play. Uprising Renegade, 1 red, 1/3. Uprising Renegade gets +2/+0 for each other modified creature you control. The big problem here is that it says other. If I was able to put a counter on this thing and then it was a 2-mana 3/3, then I would kind of like it. But since it's other, I don't think this will see too much play. I'm just not exactly sure how easy or hard it is to modify things here. But in an equipment deck, you usually just have like 2 creatures out. And if this wouldn't say other, then yeah, this would be a 2-mana 5/3, but a 2-mana 3/3 is not really what you need in an equipment deck. Like, the stats on the creature need to be really ridiculous if it's otherwise a vanilla creature, right? For equipment decks to really want it. Otherwise, they really love their like utility creatures that can't be destroyed or like are a bit harder to kill or have lifelink. Those are usually the preferred targets for equipments. So yeah, next card. Voltage Surge. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice an artifact. Deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If this spell's additional cost was paid, it deals 4 damage instead. This doesn't go face, so that is pretty sad. And I don't think this will see play because of it. I believe that is the end, right? No, we have one more card. So Kenzan, Cruzel of Defiance. Legendary land, tap at 1 red. Enters untap, by the way. Channel, 3 in red, discard it. Create 2 1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens. They gain haste until end of turn. It costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Yeah, said this again in every video, and I will see it in the future ones as well. The cycle of these legendary lands, you will play them in basically any 1 or 2 color deck ever, unless you are like, yeah, you really like those, because legendary, we do not care. If you're a snow deck, maybe you exclude them, maybe. But even then, this is so free to play. Every monocolor deck will play this. 99.999 of 2 color decks will play this. If you're going into 3 color, maybe like you start wanting to have basics instead, because you're running low on basics and you want to turn on things like Fabled Passage. And in 4 and 5 color, this is like probably not what you want. But this is just free card advantage in your mana base, and I really like it. So, yeah. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're wondering where the other videos are, you know, just check the description. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video.